welcome to this week's Heroes Table. I hope you guys are ready for some exciting stuff. As usual, I'll introduce myself. I'm Hisha, as you might know from the Discord. And with me I have Talubius and Midnight as my co-hosts.
Hello.
Hey, everybody.
So welcome. Let's get on to the agenda for today. Today we'll be talking about the High Priestess. And as usual, we will be starting by discussing the topic, which will be, as I said, the High Priestess, and then we will go over to the Q&A afterwards at the end of the show. So get your questions ready, and we'll get to that. So, High Priestess, what's the story here?
So this story is a little bit different than the other backstories in that it's a lot more of a history of events that happen sort of in ancient times compared to the adventures that you will go on with your heroes. It sort of meshes with the Valkyrie story in that it picks up with that. If you'll remember from the Valkyrie story, there's a god of death that she's fighting, and the god of death makes an escape between dimensions and ends up landing on eternity. And that's sort of where this story picks up in that ancient time. It sort of gives us more context about these crystals that we talked about in the Valkyrie story, and really a vision of where the people of eternity were at the time that all this happened. In the story, they're nomadic still. It's before they've settled down and started making cities and castles and all of that. They're still nomadic people. So it's a long time ago. These nomadic people that don't know any better see a giant fireball come down and hit eternity. And as I discussed some in the Valkyrie story, the impact is massive. Blocks out the sun for part of the earth, throws dust, dirt, debris everywhere, including these crystals. These nomadic people come across these crystals and try to use them for various purposes, not really understanding what they are or how they can be used. Some of them try to use them as weapons, and they're too brittle for that. They sort of shatter. But there's one tribe that sort of ascribes a larger meaning to them, and so they start collecting them and holding on to them, using them as totems of protection. And they noticed, as the years go on, they kept collecting them, and they noticed that as their tribespeople who wore them would pass away, the crystals seemed to glow brighter. And what the story sort of reveals is that these crystals, I think in the Valkyrie story we talked about the crystals, absorbing sort of the essence of what is around them. In this instance, it's sort of unique in that it's not just nature or fire, but it's really human essence. As these people are passing away, these crystals sort of absorb that person's knowledge and experience, and that really gives them a benefit. They have a new way of passing down history and knowledge generationally. One of the things that this generational perspective gives them is a growing issue on eternity, which is this darkness from where this massive fireball that we know to be a god of death impacted eternity. It seems to slowly be spreading, and that's concerning to them. They notice that, they've seen it, they know where it is, and they don't know what it is, but they know that whatever gets near it never comes back. And so this spreading is really an existential threat to them. So they start investigating it. And what they find is the high priest, the leader of this tribe, this specific tribe of people, send a group of warriors um, to the edge of this darkness. And these are very primitive people, so they show up with spears and the crystals that they wear for protection. Um, and they noticed, as they got closer, um, that these blue crystals started to grow brighter as they approached the darkness, almost in reaction to the darkness. Um, and in hearing that, the high priest knew what he would have to do at that time. With the spreading darkness across eternity, he realized it wasn't long until his people would be forced out of their land, and so he heads up a expedition to go into the darkness, find out about this, and try to put an end to it. Um, so that sort of begins this long journey. They build large sleds to carry supplies. He gathers every able-bodied person he can. They don't know how long they'll be gone, but they're trying to collect as many supplies as they can, and they head off into the darkness. As we've talked about, I think in previous episodes, this darkness is not just like nighttime. It's a living, breathing, oily, dark. I always picture it sort of like molasses that just fills the air.
Yeah.
Um, and so they set off into this all-consuming darkness. The only thing, that they have that's really effective are these crystals. And so, in an effort to stave off the oily tendrils of the darkness that surround them, they sort of make a formation around their sleds, ensuring that the crystals can shine brightly. And they notice whenever the crystals shine brightly, that light holds the darkness at bay, almost as if they're two different, two opposing powers. Um, so they wander and they wander and they wander. And they, walk across a landscape that's dead and empty, surrounded by eternal night. Sort of lose track of all time, place. Um, as their expedition continues, they start to see the power of this darkness. The darkness is constantly pushing on them, pushing towards them, trying to find weaknesses. It never sleeps. It never stops. And they end up discovering what would happen to them. One of the members of the party gets grabbed suddenly by the darkness, finding just the smallest shadow, and grabs him and pulls him. Totally disappears into this darkness. Sort of gives everyone in the party a preview of what they're up against. And like I said, this darkness doesn't stop trying to get at the party and the crystals and the people in the party, but it also doesn't stop talking to them, whispering things, um, dark, malicious things, really trying to get at them, not only physically, but emotionally, psychically, pushing them to their limits. Um, So really, they're running low on supplies. They are surrounded by this constant darkness that is threatening, insanity at some point. Just constant noise around them. And so they come to this. There's a head where a lot of folks want to turn around, and they come across of a steep incline up. And the crystals start resonating louder and louder, growing brighter, and the people want to turn around, but the chief begs them. They've come all this way. They've faced so much already. This constant attack. And the people agree to continue a little bit further, but if they don't find anything, they're turning home. They're done for. So, like I mentioned, they find this incline and they start climbing this incline, and what they find at the top is that they found the original crater where this fireball, this source of darkness, has impacted and landed. And what they find there is a field full of blue crystals. Now, there are, you know, gaps in this field. There are channels that the darkness is spilling out of. But, as we see with the crystals around their neck, the blue crystals in this field are trying to contain the darkness. So, having come so far, they go down into the crater. Why not? Um, they keep their sleds on the edge and they go down to try and see if they can find the source of the darkness. And they do. They don't know what it is, but it's massive. It's malicious. And as they come through the field of blue crystals, they notice an opening. And the crystals seem to form almost a circle around this opening. And they enter the crystals or enter this opening and face this massive creature. All they have are their spears and their crystals, and those crystals really save them here. It almost as if it knows what is present. They grow extremely bright, extremely powerful, and um, as they come into this opening, they've sort of formed a semicircle, and this semicircle they formed with the power of the crystals really pushes this massive being that they don't really get a good look at. Keep in mind, he's the source of this darkness. It surrounds him. It is a part of him. He oozes it as if it is the air he breathes. So all they see is a massive being, a massive hand strike at them as these crystals grow brighter. Um, Really shocked, this who we know to be the god of death starts burrowing deeply into the ground, trying to get away from this brightness, this unexpected attack, really from people at primitive people, spears, and just so happen to have these crystals that save them here. So the creature burrows down deep into eternity, trying to get away from this painful light, and disappears. You know, Runs into the core of eternity, and these people are unexpectedly victorious. The darkness seems to slow. The spread stops. They can turn around and they can go home. Um, Victorious, shockingly. And so, the crystals really not only form a central part of their society, but their religion. They form a religion around this. It is theirs to keep. These nomadic people that did this great deed that no one will believe. Form a belief structure around these blue crystals, and as they go home. So they get home and they're ecstatic. They have saved their people, they've saved their land, and they get home, and they start celebrating. And they're celebrating the high priest that led them through this land of death, led them to victory against a massive and dark creature. And what they didn't know is that not everyone from their party came back the same as they went in. There is one member of their party that the darkness got to. And that, the darkness, as we've talked about, is a sentient thing, and it has laid in wait, waiting for its opportunity. So it's at this celebration that the darkness pushes its way forward to this member's psyche, and and he assassinates the high priest in this dramatic finish here. He's in the height of his power and love and respect, and he is murdered by the darkness. The darkness gets its last laugh, if you will. And so that is sort of the end of the ancient part of this story. It's the vast majority to give you this background and this context of the High Priestess's people, who they are, sort of the foundation of their people. As far as the High Priestess herself, it's millennia later, and we see her. She is a direct descendant of that ancient high priest, simply known as the Ancient One now. And the people, in these using these blue crystals with this sort of regenerative power, it not only pushes back on the forces of death, but it helps them live longer. They notice more longevity and the ability to heal. And so, as the millennia have passed, the High Priestess's people have developed a tradition um, of helping the world of eternity, as they did before. They send their young, upon reaching an age, out into the world of eternity to help heal and help cure the world of its ailments. And that moment is where we meet the High Priestess, when she is leaving her people to go out into the world and help heal it, do what good they can. So like I said, the story focuses and spends most of its time on this foundation for the High Priestess people, give a little bit more context to the world of eternity and where it's been, what it's been through, and where, that background for the High Priestess's people. They're not just, people that appeared, but they have this long history. And that history has been passed down for millennia. The High Priestess carries her own crystal, as is bestowed upon the High Priestess's people when they're young. And that crystal holds the High Priestess's spirit in it, his knowledge, his wisdom, that experience. And I think that's something that will be really fun to explore in terms of lore and storytelling as we move forward. Um, few of our characters seem to have their own secret sources of wisdom and knowledge, and I think that'll be something interesting as we move forward to explore.
Awesome. And
Yeah.
could you repeat in case anyone missed it, because we had some people pop in at the beginning of the story, a ball of fire descended from the sky. Could you just go over that real quick with how it tied into the Valkyrie's story?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mentioned at the beginning that this story is much more of an ancient history, an ancient story, and it picks up from the Valkyrie story. And that, right when that in the Valkyrie story, when she is attacking this god of death and he makes his escape and he breaches dimensions and comes roaring down to a fresh planet, that is where the High Priestess's story really picks up. These nomadic people see a giant fireball that we know is a god of death. They have no idea. So they sort of intermesh there. You can get this continuous narrative by connecting those stories.
It's nice. Did you
Thank you.
write most of this one?
I did. I did. And, Heimdall, as always,
As always.
huge thanks to the, editor master here.
Yeah.
He really does a good job of adding color, dimension, depth, and details to these. So huge
Yep.
thanks to him, always.
I kind of like throughout the lore that we went through today from the start, like the whole exploration part of it. Like they see this big meteor, or I imagine they think it's like a meteor or something, like a big fireball, and then they go explore. But the way that you told the story, it kind of reminded me. It kind of gave me Lost City of Atlantis vibes, like throughout the thing with the crystals. Like I don't know if you guys have seen the Disney adaptation of Atlantis with Milo and the whole like submarine thing. But they the whole city of Atlantis was working with these crystals too in those movies. And I couldn't stop thinking about that as we went through, because like the crystals, so in the movie it's the crystals that kind of transforms the people, gives them power and stuff, but like the darkness in this lore kind of gave me those same vibes, and in this case the crystals are the kind of the deflecting power of the darkness, like it keeps the darkness at bay. It was just very interesting to see like how you can draw parallels, even though like the basis is completely different, but there's a lot of parallels that just seemed like interesting connections. But I just was just I'll try again. I was just wondering if you guys had seen those movies and can see like those parallels, maybe some inspiration from that, or is it just a coincidence?
I honestly haven't seen those movies at all. I'm gonna go watch them with my kids tonight.
They are actually
Check
they
it
are
out.
really good movies. I really enjoy them. But yeah, okay, that's interesting.
That's really interesting. I thought a lot about this darkness and sort of what would oppose it, what would be the opposite to it, and to me, that opposite force is um, the human spirit. Obviously, we have this cosmic conflict, the gods of life and the gods of death fighting, but in this, with the blue crystals, sort of being a source of generational wisdom and absorb as people pass away, absorbing that power and that knowledge. Um, that was sort of what I was thinking, is that it was like the human, the human spirit, human life that is the counter to this darkness that really pulls them through.
So have we discussed so far where the crystals came from? Like, do we understand the crystals fully at this point, or are we still like, so we have those crystals, but we don't really know much about them, or do we actually know like how these crystals are made? I think we in the Augur story as well we discussed like some of the origin for it, and I think in the first story, like the vampire story as well, we also touched on how the crystals were discovered. But besides that, do we know like how they ended up there?
Yeah, so in the Valkyrie story, we have this, conflict, and we have this god of death sort of wrapping himself to in this darkness to escape.
Hmm.
When the Valkyrie reaches him and strikes him with, the sort of fire that the gods of life have bestowed upon her, and that strike, this blow of opposites, um, you know, is sort of the source of these crystals, this darkness that surrounds him, and surrounds the god of darkness, being struck by its polar opposite with such force that it sort of encases this god of darkness in these crystals as it punches through dimensions. So what we have is a giant being encased in these crystals that hit the atmosphere of eternity, and really streak across the world before impacting. I think about it like, the meteor movies that I've seen. The just massive impact that breaks apart this crystal shell layer by layer as it's coming into the atmosphere, and then with the impact, it throws dirt, dust, everything that was in that impact zone, along with crystals that have broken off. Um, and we can really see that layer sort of crystals as they approach that impact zone in the story, when they've come across this incline and then this field of blue crystals, and there's a gap in the middle. You can really see where this creature came down, impacted, and sort of buried itself in that shell of crystals, just embedded itself throughout the world of eternity. I think we have some interesting other details about these crystals from the vampire story. Mining chaos crystals from underneath the castle.
Yeah, so the crystals and the darkness are kind of introduced at the same time to eternity as a land.
Yeah, sort of this
Same
ancient event. To the people, to our heroes, most of them don't know where they came from or why they're there. They've just always been there, ever present in eternity. But we get this glimpse of sort of how they came to be. We know that they're not a natural occurrence in the world.
So there would be a limited amount of this crystal in eternity.
Yeah. There will only be so many. But I think there are a lot. In my mind, there are a lot spread around the world. And they've been there for a long time. So, they're not just surface deep, but some are deeply buried in the crust.
Yeah, I think we've discussed.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think we've discussed that over time we've seen the crystals absorb different, energies from around the planet, which adjusted their color and integral power. So, as because like the warrior, we discussed that a little bit. How the people in the plains have that internal ability to call, the lightning down. And part of the reasoning for that was the distribution of the crystals, particles into the air. So interesting.
Definitely.
Just a second where you are to sort of drop our whitelist question in, if you don't mind, Hisha.
Yep, go ahead.
So for those of you that want to get on our whitelist, now is your opportunity. In the next 24 hours, come find me on the Discord, midnight 703, and DM me the name of the kingdom that the vampire story takes place in. And I will add you to our Council of Fate, which is our whitelist, and you'll be able to, that'll allow you to purchase our Gen Zero mints when they go live, among other things. So,
where can they find that information?
You can find that in the Vampire Backstory, which is in the announcements channel. You'll find a beautiful PDF, formatted PDF, in the announcements channel from February 10th. I'll even make it a little bit easier for you.
Can you repeat your Discord name? Someone is asking that.
Absolutely. My Discord name is Midnight703. I am one of the admins on the Discord. So find me, DM me the kingdom that the vampire story takes place in, and I'll go ahead and I'll add you to the whitelist. That includes anybody that's listening to the recording that we post on YouTube of this channel afterwards, but 24 hours, so February 28th.
Interesting. So before we went into this, I just wanted to say that I guess so. We talked about how the crystals are limited and how they have been there for a long time, so they're like all over the place and in the ground and stuff. I guess technically it's not impossible that more crystals could be introduced by similar events, like if the Valkyrie and the god of death comes into another fight or something. I guess it is technically possible another event could spawn in more crystals in a way. Um, Not that it would probably matter, but I guess the possibility is there since that's how they were created in the first place.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
I can absolutely see that coming. In the vampire story, we have this source of darkness that I
Hmm.
think is a pretty clear allusion to the you know to a coming encounter between the Valkyrie or your heroes and a creature similar to this god
Hmm.
of death, if not this god of death itself. So, I think that's a really good point. It's not a one-time event, um, but yeah, I think for now they are very
Hmm.
plentiful resource in different versions.
And I suppose this also might not have been the first time this like something like this has happened. We just know that this is how it was introduced to eternity, but maybe there has been previous cases like other worlds where a similar event has happened. I guess. Do we know if these crystals like do they deplete? Do they have like a limited energy source, or do they always work? Like, are they just this energy that doesn't deplete and is used against the darkness, or do they only last for so long?
A
Do
good
you
I
have
think
any
that's an
question.
opinion on
interesting
that?
question. Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting question as to whether the source is a finite or the energy is a
Hmm.
finite source. What we do know is that they absorb the energy around them. So you'll note, from the vampire story again, these chaos crystals get that chaos energy from somewhere. Um, so I think that's certainly something we can explore later in other stories.
Yeah, and not, now that you mentioned that thing, kind of an extension to the question: do they siphon the energy from somewhere? Like instead of storing energy, are they getting the energy? Like, are they just unlocking the option to use some kind of energy from somewhere that we might not know where is? Like it might not be that the crystals itself is the energy source, but maybe they can source energy from somewhere.
Hmm.
Like there's
I
a lot
think
of
that's really
opportunities.
interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's some huge opportunities, especially when you think about um, the larger conflict going on beyond eternity, how the crystals can play a role in
Hmm.
that. Other dimensions, other planes of existence. I think there's some really interesting possibilities there. Would
Yeah,
definitely like
definitely.
to explore that more with the community, with the team. Once we get rolling, I think there are going to be a lot of interesting questions like that about this world.
Hmm.
And that the world is definitely something we want to bring the community in to explore.
Mhm.
There will be, opportunities. We've already had one with the Build a Boss event, but there will
Hmm.
on our Discord. But there will be multiple opportunities for the community to really influence the story, the world. Once we get all these backstories out, I would really be interested to see if community members see this gap, see a question about the
Mhm.
world or a question about the source,
Hmm.
and if they want to explore that in a story, I think that would be something that would really be neat to see. How does the community want this world to really build out?
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely. Um, yeah. So also just to clarify, so everyone is on the same page. So we've been talking about these crystals that the High Priestess and the High Priest back in the time used, and then the crystals from the vampire stories. Are they the same crystals or are they different crystals? Just to be clear.
They are the same crystals, but as we discussed, the crystals absorb energy from different sources. So what we've seen is these crystals be exposed to different energies, and as I think Tal mentioned in the warrior story, we see them having the ability to use lightning, and so that's another set of crystals that have been exposed to an energy that uses that. And I think we'll see more different types of crystals as we move through the story and through the world.
So in essence, it's the same crystal at the base, but they have kind of transformed in separate ways, kind of throughout the many years that they have been present.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think of it like a slow change. I think in this sort of shell around this god of darkness, there are layers there, many layers of crystals that surround him. And as these layers peel off, they don't have to be the same crystals. The ones that the high priestess find are blue and contain, this energy of life. And that could be a different layer, if you will, than other crystals that land near a source of lightning, or that sort of come with the god of darkness as he burrows through eternity away from the high priestess and her people. Um, we could have some that are blank slates and some that have different energy already present. And I think that would be another interesting thing to explore, is what happens when a crystal of one energy is exposed to a different energy.
Definitely. All right, so we are right around the 40-minute mark, so I guess we can start taking questions from the chat. So if you guys have any questions in the chat, now is the time that you want to ask them. You can ask about the lore. You can also try to ask questions about the project. We will try to answer the best the best of our abilities, but we may not be able to or may not be allowed to answer all questions. So just keep that in mind. But we have a question from Misa K, and I'm sorry if I butcher your name. Where did the inspiration for Eternity come from? I'm not sure if that is asking about inspiration for the lore or inspiration for the project itself, like where the inspiration for the lore comes from or where the inspiration for the game comes from. Maybe we can... Okay, for the lore. Okay, so I guess that's a question for you guys. Like, when you write the lore, where do you find inspiration?
For me, I run games for Dungeons and Dragons, and I've read lots of fantasy books, and I played a ton of computer games, over the last 30 plus years, 40 plus years. So I got a lot to pull from. Names, ideas, some things I've just picked up along the way. You know how it becomes a mesh of ideas and concepts, and so you just try to make it. You know what? When there's 5 or 6 of us doing this, there's a lot of overlap to make sure things make sense. and I can't imagine, like, this must be just a massive undertaking for like large AAA story games. That's a lot of respect for that kind of thing, because it's a lot of work.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd have to agree with Tal. I fun fact, I've never played Dungeons and Dragons. Honest to God, never played it. But I have, played tons of computer games throughout my life, video games. I've read a ton of science fiction and other, fiction books. And this has really been fun, because you pull on everything from God, from Dune to, in my head, like H.P. Lovecraft, like Cthulhu was a big thing in my head when I started writing these stories. And I don't know if that's gonna necessarily that creature or someone like that, looking like that creature will make it into the game, but at least that sort of overarching dark enemy. Epic novels, sort of. In the Valkyrie episode, I talked about the Valkyries appearing as angels to the people of eternity. So it's really everything from, um, like Christianity and Christian history to H.P. Lovecraft to science fiction to fantasy. It all comes together into this crazy mash that we
Mm.
find ourselves in.
Yeah. I mean, the difficulty is trudging a path that's not overdone and cliched,
Mm.
because there's 10 million stories out there, and
Yeah.
and I mean, no, it's no good if it's boring. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or we've heard it before, blah blah blah. It's just uninteresting, I guess. And so, some of this may seem a little bit out there sometimes, but I mean, we're trying to set the stage for, a long-term story. So,
Yeah.
I also think it's very difficult to bring something like completely unique that doesn't remotely touch anything that's already existing, because like we've lived for many years now, like humanity. We've created a lot of stories at this point. Like there's a lot of stuff we have explored at this point, and it's kind of getting difficult to explore like only new stuff without
yeah,
touching on any existing stuff.
yeah,
So like I can also see a lot of parallels, and some of it might even be coincidental. But like if I'm just thinking like Warhammer 40k, for example, I can see some
Yeah.
connections to that as well in the Eternity lore. And whether or not that's a coincidence or if that is actually an inspiration, it's just to say that like even original ideas can like overlap existing ones as well, without being directly inspired by or like copied from something existing.
hmm
And I think it's interesting that you can take all this existing material, and then you can kind of say, okay, if I take some of this and some of that, I can still make something interesting that still feels new, even though it's technically concepts that already exist. But it's just taking these concepts and mixing them together in a different way that makes them new in a way.
yeah,
And I think there's a lot of that going on here as well.
yeah,
Yeah. I really like playing with archetypes and sort of throwing a wrench in the gear, if you will. Starting down this road where you think it's going one way, and then for some reason, my stories always have a tragedy in them. Psychoanalyze that if you want to, but they seem to like always have this path, and then something goes wrong. There's this conflict, and it sort of totally changes on an axis. Um, I really enjoy stories that do that, that start going somewhere. You're like, okay, yeah, this is whatever, this is a fine story, and you're like, you end up with what the hell? Where did that come from? So I've really enjoyed playing with that, and this idea of perspective. I think in making something new, especially when we're laying out these stories that sort of lay this foundation of a planet and a world and a history, leaving questions to me is fascinating. Like you asked about, are the crystals limited, or where did maybe they draw power from somewhere else, and all of those questions really add interest to me. I
hmm
think it's a great way to bring in our community and
mm
add to it.
yeah,
Definitely.
yeah, yeah. I like the idea of player ownership. Um, I feel like that's a big thing missing in the creative side of games. And I know there's a lot of unhappy people who make games with, what we're trying to do on this side of the blockchain, if you will. But I do think that there's a lot of energy in people and there's a lot of good ideas and a lot of creativity, and there isn't always a good place to be able to bring that to life, because everyone that makes games already has their idea. Like, it's already planned out. It's not like you get to write a letter to the developer making a game and say, hey, I like this idea, do this. It doesn't, that's not how this works, or that's not how that works. And what, for us, I think we're looking at it from a different point of view, is like, this is our game.
Yeah.
This isn't a stockholder's game who get to say, oh, we don't like that because it's not going to sell. Well, this is the people who play this game's game, and that's what it should have always been. And so I feel real strongly about that.
I think that's also one of the strong points for the whole like play and earn ecosystem, because as the player you earn part, or you own part of the game. You own the part of the game that you're interested in, and being part in creating it also, at least to me, makes this ownership worth so much more, because I actually own something that I technically also helped create. So it adds a lot of sentimental value as well to the whole concept of play and earn, that I find interesting.
Absolutely. And just with what we've done so far with the build a boss, I mean, we haven't even started the game yet, and the community's already given us a great storyline and character and, potential for things to do with it as the story goes on. And, as the game launches and we get our feet under us and we get moving, I mean, the sky's the limit on what we can do with these stories. All it takes is a little bit of energy, and don't be afraid to throw an idea out. And because with this, our community needs to be a community of willingness to listen and say, hey, we like that, we don't like that, or nothing. It doesn't always have to be a fight. I'm sure everyone has the same feeling I have, is like, you can't have a conversation you want without everybody mad about everybody all the time. And I feel like maybe a game like this can bring people together, because the people that don't want to be here won't stay. You know what I mean? Like, people are going to come in and they're going to be like, oh, this is exactly what I was looking for. And those are the kind of people that we want, because we want to do this together, and we can profit together, and we can enjoy our time together, and we can build something together. And I don't know, to me, that's a new paradigm that needs to be explored. And I think that the blockchain gives us that opportunity that never existed before. I mean, you figure where we all live, and if it wasn't for like Discord and crypto, I would not know who any of you. I mean, we wouldn't know each other. This wouldn't exist, I mean, and that's just, people gloss over the amazing importance of connection over the digital highway, if you will. A lot of people poo-poo it all the time, but I mean, I see real relationships, real people making real changes, and it happens all the time. And it's all about attitude, and it's about what you want to do with something.
Yeah.
And another point also towards the whole blockchain thing, like many, I don't know what we call them, like centralized games, if you call it that, like games that uses servers that are hosted. Like once those servers are taken offline, the game is kind of dead at that point, because you can't play the game anymore. Like if it's an online game, they take down the servers. That's kind of it. And technically, Eternity right now, as it is today, is the same, because the game itself is still run off centralized servers, but there's also the blockchain integration. But imagine if the front end, the game itself for Eternity was hosted on like the IPFS, for example. Like the game would never become offline, even if there were no servers to run it, because as long as the IPFS is running, which is a decentralized file system, for those wondering, like as long as there are nodes on the network, the servers would always be there. Like there would always be something hosting it, which means the game would live for as long as the blockchain does and the IPFS does. And it's not dependent on this single entity running the servers.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think over time as this space evolves and the technology continues to evolve, because it will, you're going to see, I think, more and more people jump in, because you can, again, in the past, if you wanted to get a game funded, there's a massive gatekeeping to that, for both sides, the people who want to make the game and the people who want to help pay to make the game, or invest in the game. And not often do those two sides come together, in the traditional world. And I just see, you're right, decentralized games that could potentially live on. I mean, I don't see a problem with that. I'm not sure what the hate is for that I'm seeing a lot of,
I think most of the hate, like by traditional gamers or other entities, I think it's just that they don't understand it. Because I guess it's no secret that the mainstream media is kind of conveying blockchain and crypto as this bad thing that's bad for the environment, because they're focusing on like literally Bitcoin and Ethereum, which are the most polluting cryptos we have, I guess. But they neglect all the other things like Polygon and Phantom and everything else that is actually having a quite low environmental impact. But we don't care about that in the mainstream media, apparently. We only care about the things that are wrong with it, because that fits our narrative that crypto is bad. And I mean, you can, of course, have conspiracies that say, oh, they're collaborating with the government to try to make people hate cryptocurrency so that cryptocurrency won't take over and stuff like that. Now, I'm not going to go into conspiracies, but
GG.
But there's definitely a narrative going on that crypto is bad and blockchain is bad. And I think it's just because people don't understand it. They don't see the benefits. Like, why should we do this when what we have works fine? Like, I think that's kind of how it is. Like, why change something that isn't broken?
Yeah. Well, technology evolution is always difficult on people. I mean, it's...
And I bet you we had the same problem when the internet became a thing. Like suddenly,
we did.
There's this new technology that changed the way that we use the world.
I was there.
So I mean, I think this is very natural. Like it just happens with new technology. Yeah. Probably happened with the smartphone as well. Like suddenly the phone.
I was just gonna say that 25 years ago, like maybe like 10 people on the planet was thinking that everyone would have a phone connected to the internet, that you could interact with anybody 24 hours a day, all the time. I mean, people back then would have been like, oh, you know what I mean? Like, it's the same idea that new stuff to people that are comfortable with the world is not enjoyable because it's too much change and it's too much to learn and it's too much adjustments. But younger people don't know any better. And so 25 years from now, all of this, being upset with the metaverse and virtual reality and blockchain and stuff, it's all going to merge together. And 25 years from now, those kids won't know any different. It'll just be life, and all the people that are shaking their fist at the sky, it wouldn't have mattered anyway.
I also think specifically for the metaverse, I think Facebook also has a large say in why people don't like it. Like, Facebook is just they just completely ruined what metaverse actually means, because what Facebook is making is not a metaverse, like in the original sense of the word metaverse. They just they made metaverse like a corporate thing, and now everyone associates metaverse with Meta's version of metaverse, which is not really a metaverse at all. It's just a virtual world. Like VR chat or something like that, and suddenly everything is a metaverse. So Facebook has kind of ruined that part, and they also and that's also maybe my personal opinion. Like, I think Facebook is generally bad for technology because in my belief, everything they touch kind of gets ruined. But yeah, I guess that's personal.
No, that's okay. I mean, when we're discussing some of this stuff can get super philosophical and even esoteric in ways, because what does even the metaverse mean? And, I had a conversation the other day with someone about that. And, I feel like anytime you are shifting your perception from the physical reality, you're shifting into a metaverse situation, whether it's reading a book, watching a movie, watching television, playing a video game. I mean, anytime that you're causing that transfer of consciousness from one thing to another, I think that you are, moving into that quote unquote metaverse thing, and I mean, like, just an overall global zeitgeist of the metaverse. What is that, and what does that entail, and who gets to experience it? Is it only people who are subscribed to Meta? So
Right.
So in essence, the metaverse doesn't even have to be digital. For example, like you could
right.
have a
No, I think
yeah.
absolutely. I think the metaverse has always existed. As long as people have told stories and had dreams and wrote books and listened to music, anytime you shifting your consciousness away from this physical reality, it's natural. It's what we do. So it makes sense that over time we're going to want to have a visual representation of that fantastical world, and that's what eventually VR or AR or whatever, will do. And it's because that's what we want. I mean, if we didn't want it, it wouldn't happen. And it's no different than social media or anything else. And we can all be upset about whatever we want to be upset about, but whatever happens because we want it to happen. And there's no arguing that.
Yeah, and I think that is also emphasized because, like, right now at least, the technology is driven by corporations, and obviously corporations aren't working on stuff that doesn't make them money. That's not how corporation works. So obviously they work on this because there is money to be made with it. So there is demand for it, and regardless of how many people say we don't want this. Clearly enough people want it for it to make sense.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, early adopters, it's just no different than anything else. It just really isn't. Half the people are mad about it. Half the people aren't. Eventually, everyone decides what goes forward and what doesn't.
Yeah, definitely.
So.
But yeah, that was a bit of a tangent, but I think it was an
interesting
discussion.
That was good. Yeah, that was fun.
But yeah, it's about time that we wrap up the stream here. So if you guys have any final comments, you can come with those. Otherwise, we can shill our socials and call it a day and stuff
All
like
right.
that.
Yeah, just thanks everyone for listening. Appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. We'll get this story published up, and don't forget about the whitelist opportunity. See y'all next week.
All right,
Bye.
and remember to join our Discord and our Twitter, and follow us on Twitch, Instagram. We changed some of the links, so I may be a little rough around the edge, but at least on Twitch, it's definitely Eternity RPG. So you can, well, you're watching it right now, unless you're watching it on YouTube. That you should also subscribe on YouTube, by the way. But if you're watching this on YouTube, you should definitely go to Twitch right now, Eternity RPG, and then follow us so you can watch this live next week. And this is very interesting to talk in the past, in the present. For Discord, I think it is also Eternity RPG. Let me confirm. Can someone confirm that? The Eternity
I can tell
RPG.
you, Instagram is eternity_RPG.
Checking here. I need to.
I'm looking.
Yeah, discord.gg/eternityRPG for Discord.
That's it, yep.
And yeah, I think what is the Twitter? Is it also Eternity, or was
Eternity
that changed? But didn't they change it to Play Eternity?
Oh.
It's either Twitter, I think at Eternity RPG or at Play Eternity.
Yeah,
I don't remember.
It's at Eternity RPG.
Okay, fine. Excellent. Now we got that out of the way. We should probably we should get better at the links for the future, so we can plot the actual socials. But yeah, you guys should definitely check that out. Also, alternatively, you can check the links channel in the Discord. That should be the up-to-date information at least. If in case we fuck it up, then you should definitely be able to find it there. So definitely join the Discord to get all the most recent information. I think that's where we have mostly up-to-date stuff.
Yep.
Excellent. Yeah, once again, thank you guys for coming by, and we of course hope to see you again next week, where we will have another interesting topic, and maybe some more interesting small talk.
Yeah.
It was definitely a little different this time, but I think it was pretty interesting. And if you guys think it was, let us know, so we can so we know that you guys are also interested in our tangents. Yeah. Right.
Glory to the holders.
Glory to the holders. All right. See you next week, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.